This is Paul Schneiderman today on the 164th edition of the Sports Untold podcast, also on the Seattle-based Rainier Avenue Radio.world. My special guest today is King County Superior Court incumbent judge Sean O'Donnell. And Judge O'Donnell is also a candidate for the Washington State Supreme Court. So we have a statewide candidate on Sports Untold today. My assistant sidekick and producer is Olivia Coyne. Olivia's also been the main show host before. And I go back to living in her family a long time. Olivia is a big sports fan. Olivia is finishing her second semester at Seattle University Law School. She's a University of Washington graduate. And it's just great. Olivia's still around to help with this podcast and to assist with some other legal related work that I may give her at times. I'm going to get back to you in a minute, Sean. This podcast is also on Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, Google, iTunes, Podbean. You can go to sportsuntoldpodcast.net because it's my show on these aforementioned outlets. You can also just go to my law office website, plslawoffices.com. A lot of people seem to find my show by just Googling Sports Untold YouTube. Click the like button, not the hate button. I'm going to get back now to Judge O'Donnell. Sean O'Donnell has been, as I mentioned, a King County Superior Court judge now since about early 2013. He's now a candidate for the Washington State Supreme Court, the highest office in the highest judicial office in the state of Washington. Sean O'Donnell also has a sports side to him. Sean was a member of a integrated basketball team in Seattle in 1986 that's profiled in Doug Merlino's wonderful book, The Hustle. And it's a book not only about Sean's basketball team, which included a lot of affluent kids, also a lot of African American kids in the inner city. It's also a lot about Seattle in the 1980s and American society in the 1980s. It's a really good book. I'm about a year or two older than Sean, but I found the book very connective, and I've known Sean for a while and some other guys in that team. And yeah, I think we're going to have a great talk today. A little bit the hustle, the famous book, a little about the judiciary, the law, and we definitely get hit on some sports. There is, as I
Great.
mentioned, a sports side to Judge O'Donnell. But Judge O'Donnell, thank you for coming on the 164th edition of the Sports Untold podcast, also on Rainier Avenue Radio.
That's awesome. I'm thrilled to be here and I want to come back for the 200th anniversary edition. If you guys like cycle through the prior guests, please put me on your invite list.
Well, if somebody will come back, if the show's still around, but maybe I'll have to reserve you for the 200th. I don't know if anyone else is going to want to come back either. So, but yeah, I will have to remember that. Have to remember that.
Yeah.
Well, I want to talk a little about your background. And why don't you just kind of tell us, and Olivia's going to have some questions today too about sports and law. Why don't you kind of tell us you got the bug to become an attorney?
Mm. I wish I could say that it was like some inspirational moment. I mean, there was inspiration in it. I worked for a guy who was really focused on public service. I also watched lot of Law and Order, like the old Law and Order, and I just was like fascinated by the trial part of the show. And I remember having a conversation with my parents after college, and like what are you going to do with your life? And we sort of ruled out all the things I couldn't do, like, no, you can't be a doctor. No, you can't go into sales. No, you are not doing an accounting. Teaching, maybe. What about the law? And I'm like, oh, talking a lot? Okay. So that was sort of that conflicts of, the TV, public service. That was a big thing for me. I have always gravitated to that. And then it just seemed to sort of fit with my skill set. Apparently, being Irish and talking go hand in hand. And so you just sort of got to ride the wave. You know what I mean?
A lot of Irish and Jewish lawyers. Yeah, yeah. A lot of schmoozing, right? Yeah, yeah. Um, so I want to talk about your book, or well, the book that was written or you're profiled in The Hustle by Doug Merlino. Terrific book. Came out in 2011. As I mentioned in the introduction, it's a book about an integrated Seattle basketball team. And tell us a little bit about that book first, and I'll ask you some more specific
Sure.
questions about your experiences with The Hustle.
Well, I love that Doug wrote this book, and it was an insight into his life, but it was also, as you mentioned, in sort of the the pre-show warm-up, an insight into what was Seattle like in the early 80s. And for me, one of the central players in that book, or central, the force of nature, the gravity, was a man named Randy Finley. So Randy Finley, for the older Seattleites who watched the show, he owned the Seven Gables Theater, he owned the Neptune, he owned the Guild 45th, and he was really an eclectic artist, hippie, poet. Went on to be a winemaker, and he had a heart of gold. And one of the things that really Randy was invested in or made him motivated to do more was sort of the injustice he saw in education, the injustice he saw in um, how youth of color were treated in our city. And he had this idea and I'm probably going to do it an injustice in the description. But the idea was, hey, look, let's bring kids together and put them on the basketball court because regardless of, race, wealth, kids playing basketball is the great equalizer. You instantly become friends. You have a common purpose and commitment. Um, and and Randy had this idea that like we're going to bring them together, we're going to bring these kids together, and they're going to do something. And this is my contribution to bringing community into it. Young. We were eighth graders when we started, eighth and ninth graders. So we didn't know that all the greater dynamics that he was thinking about as an adult. And we were kids. And we're like, sweet, let's play basketball, let's win some games. So Randy was really the central. He was the central feature and out of central casting for this team.
I was on a similar team with I was a bench warmer like Doug Merlino with John Stridle and some other guys. The late Demetrius Du Bois was on our team, and it was a wonderful
Yeah.
experience. I met a lot of kids that I probably wouldn't have met if I wasn't on that team. So it was a great experience. How has that shaped you long term, Sean, being a junior high kid and being on an integrated basketball team? How has that shaped your life long term?
Well, I grew up in Bellevue, and uh, Bellevue was really white community, and I went to a school that was predominantly white, and so this was for me, and being 13 or 14 years old, it was a new experience, and it was impactful because I'm meeting new kids, but also seeing kids who had very different backgrounds and experiences than I did, and I was struck by the similarities, the parents showing up to the games. And, when you're 13, 14 years old, your world is just, so sheltered and myopic. And I've never forgotten the experience. I mean, as we, as I've grown and went into adulthood, some of the kids I played with had really hard times as young adults and as adults. One of them was involved in, a terrible murder that, when I went on to be a prosecutor, I learned a little bit more about. And others, I see one of my friends, Myron, every once in a while down by the courthouse. So that, I've never left that story as it may be. I mean, those are all people that I care about, and I don't see them a lot, but we're all friends, even today.
Tell us about the late Terrell Johnson. He is profiled in Doug's book, The Hustle. Tell us about Terrell. Very sad that he passed.
Well, he's a great basketball player. His lateral foot speed was amazing, and he was a great kid. I didn't know him very well. Terrell. Oh, I'm trying to remember. I think he went to Garfield High School before his death, and I think he played for Garfield. Um, his life just ended way too soon and in total tragedy. And it is a very sad, sad part of that book.
Very sad kid, but wonderful book. I highly recommend it. And yeah, you're one of the And who would play Sean O'Donnell in that movie when the hustle comes out, though?
Oh, well, you never said you were going to ask that question.
I got a few more.
I mean, probably the guy from, like, I'm going to age date myself. Probably the guy from ER, one of those,
Okay. Okay.
the bald doctor from ER. I can't remember his name, but
Okay. Um, so you went to Georgetown University, and you're
yep,
about what, 6'8"?
6'8".
Did you play any hoops at Georgetown?
I did not play. Here's the thing: you can't teach height. So I was a okay to not great basketball player. I played a year at college at Claremont McKenna before transferring to
Oh, you
Georgetown.
did. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. But at Georgetown, like I was there in the Matumbo years, sort of the trail end of the more Alonzo Mourning years, and you had to be really, really good, even to be invited to try out for the practice squad. That was not in my lane.
But you are a former college basketball player playing at Claremont.
I mean, I played on the freshman team, maybe a couple suited up, didn't play a ton for a couple of games on the varsity squad, but yeah, I played. I mean, I
Yeah.
played for a year down at Claremont and then
Yes.
transferred to Georgetown.
So I'm going to ask you a question. Who is your favorite Georgetown basketball player in history? I'm going to mention a few: Pat Ewing, Allen Iverson, Alonzo Mourning, Dikembe Mutombo, Reggie Williams, Eric Sleepy Floyd. There's a few, but mention who your favorite Georgetown basketball player is in history.
Well, Allen Iverson, he's just explosive and devastating and so fun to watch. And I think Alonzo, he just, you talk about carrying, he's sort of like Atlas with the team and the world on his shoulders. He's awesome too. I'm not doing the other ones justice, but you asked me for a few, so those
Iverson
those
was
guys
so much
come
fun to watch. Yeah,
those guys come to mind. Yeah.
he was entertainment to watch. So what's happened to the Georgetown basketball program since the great John Thompson years, 1980s? It just isn't as prominent men's basketball program as it used to be. What? Give me your insights on what's happened.
In all candor, I don't follow the program all that much. I know they've had some coaching up and downs over the years, but you're right. They've never really lit a fire like they did back in '84 when they, dazzled the world with their NCAA tournament performance. Um, I don't really have a good answer for you. I can't say that my knowledge of Georgetown hoops right now is super deep.
I
Um,
understand.
it's, great place to go to college, awesome place to be on a team. But sometimes it takes a long time to build a program and have the inspiration to do something magical.
And trying to build a program back up isn't always easy either. Yeah. So
Yeah, that's true.
kind of interesting. Let Pat Ewing go as the coach, a Georgetown legend about 2023. I believe he was let go, and that was a little bit of a kind of weird having Pat Ewing being let go by Georgetown, but that happens in sports.
Yeah.
Is there much of a Seattle Northwest Georgetown Alumni Association?
Oh yeah, we got a good squad up here in the Pacific Northwest. There are a lot of Hoyas bouncing around. My friend Rod Dembowski, you probably know
I
Rod.
know
He's
Rod.
on the
Sure, I
King
know
County,
Rod. Yeah.
yeah, he's on the King County Council. Rod is a Hoya. Of course, SU's president is going to be a Hoya. Uh, President Penalver is headed to Georgetown to be president there, which is super cool. But there are Hoyas all over the place. Hoya undergrad and Hoya Law School. We got a good crew out here in the Pacific Northwest. The other Washington.
Great school, great Jesuit school. I'm gonna have Olivia jump in here in a moment, but I got two questions for you, a little about your legal career. We're gonna hit on sports, of course, too today. Um, there was a famous case you were involved in as a prosecutor, the Green River murder case, the Gary Ridgway case, and that was a highly publicized serial murder case. Just kind of tell us about some behind the scenes insights you have about that famous, horrible serial murder case.
Well, I could take up the entire podcast with stories about that thing, but you're right to describe it as horrible. because so many girls and young women lost their life to a psychopath, murderer, evil person. And that case sort of had it all in terms of the legal issues that were presented. There was politics involved. There was incredible investigation by law enforcement, like next level investigation. There was the trauma of ultimately resolving it and having all those families at the sentencing. A couple things I remember that stand out to me. I will June Friday. It was Friday, June 13th, 2002, when we had had Ridgway charged with 7 counts of aggravated first degree murder. And one of the interesting aspects of that case is that we hired a micrologist, so a forensic scientist who he's great with a microscope. And what he had found in some of the crime scenes was the victims had what's called a ligature that was used to strangle them. And a ligature can be clothing or it can be a rope, but in this instance, it was clothing. It was the victim's socks in one instance, and her jeans. In another victim was, I believe, the jeans. So the micrologist looked under the microscope at the fabric of the ligature, and what he found were tiny microscopic spheres of paint. So why was that important? Ridgway was a truck painter, and he spent all day in a paint booth painting Kenworth trucks.
Remember that? Yeah.
Yeah, and so truck painters, when you spray paint, the paint takes on a distinct physical characteristic. It's like a tiny sphere or tiny ball. And what the micrologist found was embedded in the ligature were tiny spheres of paint. So, and they had a very distinct pattern when they hit the fabric. So then he took a next step, and I told you about this amazing detective work. We sent a detective out. This was in 2002, 2003. Found a Kenworth truck painted in the 80s, undoubtedly in the same booth where Ridgway had worked. And we scraped the truck and the paint. And we looked at the chemical signature of the paint from the truck and the spheres in the ligature, and there was a chemical match. There was
Wow.
a signature.
Wow.
So at that point, where we had these 7 counts of aggravated first degree murder charged, the elected prosecutor at the time, Norm Mailing, decent, kind man, but elected, and he had promised the public, I never bargain with the death penalty. So public statement, bright red line in the sand. In walks Ridgway's defense lawyer, and I'm sort of paraphrasing here.
Tony
And
Savage.
Tony
Famous,
Savage, that's
yeah,
right.
famous lawyer. Famous late lawyer.
Famous defense lawyer,
Yeah.
a really good defense lawyer.
Oh, yeah.
And Tony came and talked to our lead prosecutor at the time and said, well, what if we could solve 15 of your problem cases? So for those of us on the team, the trial team, we recognized immediately what he was saying. So we had 7 murders that we had charged, but we had 42 other murders on our list that would never be solved but for the killer's confession. So Savage was saying he's it. He's the Green River Killer, and he will confess if you take the death penalty off the table. So our lead prosecutor didn't answer him, and a couple of weeks went by, and Tony Savage came back and said, "Well, what if we could resolve 30 of your problem cases?"
Mm, interesting.
Interesting. So we still hadn't gotten to Norm yet, or we
Right.
had, but hadn't pitched anything to him. And then Tony came back again, I think a third time, and I'm doing all this from memory.
Right.
And I think at that point he said something like, well, what if we could solve 50 or more of your problem cases? So in that moment, we sort of sat around the table and we knew that if we did the deal, it might mean the end of the death penalty in Washington state. But everyone on the trial team was agreed we got to do the deal. And to his great credit, nor mailing who really believed in doing justice and knowing that all those cases would never be solved unless you had the confession, he agreed and said, we'll do the deal. And that set off this incredible 6 month expedition where Ridgway, we had to make sure that he was the real killer. And we wanted him to give details to us that only the killer would know. But we had to do it in secret because if the public found it's called a proffer. So if the
Remember that.
public
Remember
knew,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
if the public knew that there had been a proffer, then he wouldn't get a fair trial. So someone came up with the idea. We worked in this, we sort of lived in it. We worked in this commercial office space, ironically, right across the street from Kenworth, where Ridgway had painted in the truck booth. It was on East Marginal Way by the airport. And someone came up with the idea is like, well, let's have him live in the supply closet. So they brought him down on June 13th and guarded by the SWAT team. We checked him out from the jail on a ruse. We said he's going to Western State or something like that. And then for 6.5 or 7 months, he lived in the supply closet, guarded by the SWAT team, and started to confess to all these murders.
And you were part of the expeditions where they were searching the bodies, correct? And all that.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we all participated. The detectives did the interviews. We would watch the interviews on closed circuit, but they were in charge of the investigation. But there were times when we called them field trips. So again, we wanted to make sure that he was the real deal because you know this, the case had been highly publicized, and it could be easy for someone who wanted infamy or whatever to say, "Oh, I'm the killer," but not provide salient details to actually things that they would not have seen in the media. So the way it came up is we would take him out and we'd have three vans, front van, SWAT team, rear van, SWAT team, middle van, Ridgway lawyers, SWAT team, and would basically just say, all right, take us to where you left the body. And
And
what was really striking about his memory, this was 20 years or so since the human remains had been found. And there was so much growth and change and underbrush that had developed in that time. And even though we had the detectives who had processed the scene originally on the Green River case in the 2000s, Ridgway could take us within feet and say, that's where I left the body.
did you interact with him directly?
I not a lot, but yeah, I talked to him a couple times.
Was it weird?
Totally.
I bet. I bet.
Yeah, it's sort of hair on the back of your neck weird.
Yeah, yeah.
Standing
When
up
you
on the back
talked
of
to
your
him, was it purely about the investigation? Was it just purely about some?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, wow. Um, I'm gonna have Olivia jump in after this question.
Okay.
You've been after this two more questions. I'm gonna have Olivia jump in with some law related questions. I'm gonna have Olivia come back with some sports related
Okay.
questions. You've been a judge since 2013. What's the toughest decision you've had to make so far as a King County Superior Court judge?
Hmm. I'm not sure I can single out one decision because difficulty in decisions take different flavors. So there's difficult legal decisions, like this is a very complicated analysis on, say, for example, insurance coverage. There's constant vertical exhaustion of insurance policies, horizontal exhaustion of insurance policies. Like that's in the weeds, really big brain stuff. Those are hard. The ones I think are sort of emotionally hardest or hardest to maintain the discipline of being a judge and following the law, taking into account that there are real people in front of you, are cases involving family law, because we get hard choices in family law cases. Parents have kids and they want to relocate out of state. And relocating out of state, if you're the primary parent, and the presumption is you get to go, And if the mom's left behind or the dad's left behind, you just look at this scenario and you realize, okay, there's legitimate reason for the move and the criteria meets the move, but that relationship with the parent who stays behind will never be the same. Those are
So
very,
custody type decisions must be very hard, right?
they're very hard.
Yeah,
Custody type
definitely.
decisions are very, and then I say the third sort of category of decisions that are hard involve criminal sentencings. I tell people this a lot. There, there are many more bad choices than there are bad people. And I see people in my court for sentencing who have made bad choices, but they have, they're not like the guy we were just talking about, right? But their bad choice has a consequence, and sometimes that consequence can be overwhelming. And so, keeping in mind again the structure of a judge's role is work within the law, but also recognize there's someone human here. And it's funny going back to Randy Finley, who I started talking to you about. So here's a tidbit about Randy. Randy's dad was a Supreme Court justice in the state of Washington. His name was Robert Finley. And this is something I've kept with me all through my career as a judge. But his dad had a saying. I've never forgotten it. In fact, I call on it daily, I think. And the saying is this: there's a difference between the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. And that difference is people.
Good
And
point.
that has a lot of meaning to me.
Yeah, definitely. I like that line a lot. All right, this is my next question. I'm going to have Olivia
Okay.
jump in a minute. So, you and I, as attorneys, obviously, I'm aware of how important the Washington State Supreme Court is. I mean, you're running for it. Obviously, you know all about the Washington State Supreme Court. But for a lot of lay persons, people outside the law, the whole judicial system can be very foreign to people. And a lot of people don't really know how to vote for the Washington State Supreme Court. They're not really familiar with it. Give like a 60-second nutshell what the Washington Supreme Court is and does.
So, okay, here's Civics 101.
Okay.
We have state court systems and then we have a federal court system. In the federal court system, you hear about the United States Supreme Court and you hear about circuit courts. So there's a whole body of what's called federal law. There's federal statutes, so that the U.S. Congress passes, and there's federal case law uh, holdings that the U.S. Supreme Court has, the highest court in all the land. Every state has its own court system. So Washington has its own court system, Idaho, Nebraska, and the like. And in those court systems, there is a highest court, typically called the Supreme Court. So Washington has a Supreme Court. We have basically three levels of court. We have a trial court. That's where you practice for years. That's where I practiced before becoming a judge. We have an intermediate level of court called the appellate court. And then we have the state Supreme Court, which is the final stop, really the final stop, with few exceptions on what state law is. So, what does the Supreme Court do? A number of things. Like if there are challenges to statutes, state statutes, that'll be resolved by the Supreme Court. If our appellate divisions have a disagreement on the same topic or the same issue, same facts, same question about a statute, the state Supreme Court could resolve it. And those decisions carry the full force of law, like the legislature, if it passes a law in both chambers, the governor signs it, it is now a law that applies for the whole state. Well, that's what sometimes they're referred to as holdings or opinions. An opinion is a written decision by the court that has the full effect of a law that would have been passed in the legislature and signed by the governor. So immensely important. It decides issues. I mentioned the death penalty, like the state Supreme Court resolved the death penalty. Some of your listeners, I'm sure, have heard of the McCleary decision, which involves state education. It had a decision on gay marriage that actually the U.S. Supreme Court said, we actually think gay marriage is okay. Our state Supreme Court earlier said it wasn't based on a statute and passes rules. Rules are very important, and our Supreme Court sits in what's called a quasi-legislative capacity to pass rules, and those rules govern a lot of things, like when an arrest warrant can be issued, or public defender caseload standards, or how much bail you can set. Uh, so it is super significant, but out of sight. And people often, we have like a 20 to 30% drop off from the top of the ticket on a ballot to the judges because people are like, I don't want to have to vote for a judge. I don't understand this. Don't make me choose.
I liked your working definition and very practical and educational on the Washington State Supreme Court, and appreciate that. I'm going to have Olivia jump in with a couple law-related questions too.
Okay.
Olivia, jump in. I kept promising you were going to jump in, Olivia. I'm finally doing that. So
Well, I'm going to use this to my advantage. I'm in crim right now, and I am having trouble with figuring out the best ways to describe the levels of intent between second degree murder and voluntary manslaughter. I was wondering if you'd be able to help
Well,
me out.
Olivia, I feel like this is a pop quiz law school exam. Well, second degree murder, you've heard of the expression mens rea,
Yes.
and mens rea is Latin, and it goes to what you just said, intent. Um, so second degree murder, the quantum of the intent is less than, for example, first degree murder. First degree murder or aggravated murder, you're actually plotting it out. Like that could be a murder for hire or you're lying in wait. You have forethought on how you're going to execute literally somebody else. Second degree murder is more there, it's allows for more of an in the moment decision. So second degree murder is I'm really mad at someone and I'm taking the gun out of my purse or out of my dash and I'm shooting them. It lacks that sort of longer lead sophistication. Now, you don't always need a longer lead on first degree murder, but that's a rough way of losing it, or a rough way of describing it. And then manslaughter is involves less intent and more recklessness. Like I knew that there was a danger, it was clear, and I ignored the danger, and someone died. That is a really simplistic paraphrase, but I think those are sort of a working distinction between the two.
That's actually very helpful. I think I feel it clicking. I already took the midterm on it and I did well, but then I was looking back at my outline and was like, oh no, I think I
Olivia,
lost it.
first year law student, gets to get insights from a former long-term prosecutor and current Superior Court trial judge. Pretty cool,
I
Olivia.
know, can't get much better than that. And my other question, this is not really law related, but one of my favorite movies is Silence of the Lambs. And when you were describing um the Green River case, it kind of reminded me of that. Do you feel that way at all about the movie?
So I've seen the movie. Anthony Hopkins was really smart. Gary Ridgway was not. And and I'll caveat it this way. Uh, he was he is not a super intelligent man, but the intelligence he did have was devoted almost entirely to killing. And so, you think of a cat's brain isn't very big, so it can't talk to you or, you know, um, but a cat knows how to hunt a bird. And that was sort of how Ridgway was wired. The the cruelty and what's different about the movie is, of course, real life what's happened in the Ridgway case, but the psychopathy, it's startling because we're all caring, loving people and have emotion, but I'll just give you a really graphic and terrible example. But there was an instance where Ridgway, one of the things he would do when he picked up girls and young women is that he would have pictures of his son. He had a young son who was about 8 or 9, and he'd have pictures of his son on the dash in his truck, or he'd leave a toy in the truck. And he did that deliberately to lower the fear because the Green River Killer was in the media back then, but to lower people's defenses, like, oh, you're a dad, you couldn't possibly be the killer. So he used that as a ploy or a ruse regularly. But one instance, he actually had his son in the car when he picked a young woman up. And Ridgway had said to the investigators he would never leave any witnesses. So he picks up a young woman, takes her out, and kills her. And his son was in the truck. And one of the detectives asked him, you told us you would never have a witness to any of these crimes, but your son was in the truck. What would have happened if your son had seen you? And he didn't have any emotion. He didn't pause, and he just said, "I would have killed him." So that's just a level of danger and psychopathy and evil, um, that I hope no one listening to this show, and you might even edit it out. It's just so graphic, but no one, I hope, ever encounters anything like that.
I think it's important to mention that story, Sean, Judge O'Donnell. I think that's actually powerful in many ways. Olivia, go ahead. Any of the last questions for Judge O'Donnell?
Oh, as far as law stuff goes, I mean, pretty basic questions of how did what mm, what was
We
the
can come
best
back
way
to.
for you to get through your first year of law school? Like, what kept you going? Because it's pretty brutal.
Oh, yeah, the first year of law school stuff. You know what got me going? I listened to a lot of Chopin. Like I would just crank on the piano. I don't play the piano. I would just listen to him. And um I'll tell you, every time one of his pieces come on, it just brings me back. I listen to so much Chopin. It's sort of a crazy thing to say, but you read so much, you write so much. It gave me focus and concentration. The other thing is I had to tell my family and friends, like, I love you guys, but I'm not going to see you for the next 9 months. I was working at the time. I had a job down at Boeing, and so I'd work during the day, and then I would drive to the law school, which was not in Seattle when I went. It was in Tacoma.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was in the old Tacoma library, and or maybe it was the old
That's where
Tacoma.
I went. I was in Tacoma during my law school years.
Was
Yeah.
it the Bon Marché? Was that what it was? It was
Some
the
old
like,
Rhodes department store, maybe it was.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
And it had the worst elevator, like the loudest escalator you could ever encounter. But it produced nice white noise to concentrate. Anyways, sorry to get long-winded on you.
No, no.
Yeah, that's helpful.
What?
I don't love it in the library. It's just a little too quiet. It's kind of eerie. Lets me think too much.
Mm.
Could see that. I went back and forth from the library and home, wherever. Hey, speaking of movies, the Anthony Hopkins famous movie just came up. What is your favorite sports movie, Judge O'Donnell?
Hoosiers.
Hoosiers, good one. Yeah, you're a basketball guy too. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
like it,
Hoosiers is
like it.
like, I'm such a big Gene Hackman fan. Like, I don't think there's a bad movie he's been in. Uh, like
Great
he was
actor.
great as Lex Luthor and Superman, Hoosiers. Um, Have you ever seen the movie No Way Out with
Great
Kevin
movie.
Costner?
Yeah, great
Great
movie.
movie.
He was
Olivia,
in an
have you?
80s movie that was shot in Seattle. Took place, I think it was called Twice in a Lifetime with Anne Margaret. There was
Mm,
a scene film at the Ivors over by the University Bridge. Yeah,
no,
that
I
was
haven't seen. Well, then
underrated.
there was the French Connection.
Oh yeah,
Like
great
that's really
actor.
going back.
Heck of a
Yeah.
movie, actually. So a couple more questions. I like to get questions from the audience, and Mark Lamb, an attorney friend, we went to high school together. He wanted me to ask you if you view the Washington State Supreme Court as like a basketball team, and you want the court or the team to be well-rounded, what specific skills and experiences do you add, Sean O'Donnell, that would add the nine-member Washington State Supreme Court team?
Well, I would say from the outset, I don't think that there's any sitting justice or justice or candidate for justice who has the trial experience that I do. And because so much work happens in the trial courts, and this is where people are. telling their stories. Like as a prosecutor, you tried almost 100 jury trials. Um, and you know, Paul, how much work goes into just one jury trial. And
Absolutely.
then yeah, right. And as a trial judge, like I've had to do it all. I sign search warrants, I turn them down. I've made I mean, in my career as a judge, I've made thousands of decisions about should I grant a protection order? Do I release someone or I hold someone? What do I do when the parent wants to relocate? Do I sign this child support order? What do I do in this discovery demand? So I would say that breadth of experience and the fact that I've had to bring an analytical framework to really hard cases constantly is going to be great preparation to read about it because that's what you do in the appellate court. Okay, that's one thing I would bring, and I would consider that the equivalent of knowing how to make a layup. The second thing I would say is I've been really involved in the operations of the court. So I've served on our in King County Superior Court. I've led the criminal department. I've led the family law department. I've chaired the budget committee. I've been on our executive committee. I'm the current what's called the special inquiry judge in King County. Was appointed to that by my colleagues that oversees early stage of corruption, public corruption investigations. And I'm the judge up at Harborview Medical Center, where I deal with people who present as a danger to themselves or others. And then I've led 3 task forces across the state and have been really invested in how do we keep the judiciary independent. So that's a management piece that not a lot of folks talk about or know about. But if you put in Justice Mungia, who came in last year, and you figure that there are going to be at least 4 new justices in this cycle, that's 5 people. And Justice Mungia was not a judge before he joined the Supreme Court. That's 5 new people with really no concrete judicial branch management experience. And like I've been to too many meetings, but I've got that under my belt. So that I think is a second feature, and that you might equate that to a soft hook in the middle of the key.
Do you think he would add more philosophical diversity to the current Washington State Supreme Court?
Well, I think to the current Supreme Court. Yeah, maybe. I think, my first half of my career had a focus on public safety. And I look at some of so for example, rulemaking. I think there's real opportunity there to improve rulemaking. 2 years ago, I'll give you an example, concrete example, the public defender caseload standards. This was a big decision. So the Supreme Court, so just so your listeners know, what does that mean? Public defenders have some of the hardest jobs in the legal profession. Like they are doing the work and they are overworked. Like right now across the state, they have too many cases. So their their caseloads are set by the Supreme Court and they have to come down. Here's the challenge though. The Supreme Court, and I wrote about this 2 years ago and co-wrote an op-ed in the Times with a colleague and said, look, before you change the case standards, you should have a plan. And the reason I said that is we don't have enough lawyers who want to be public defenders right now. And we don't have money to pay new public defenders. And the number that the Supreme Court was talking about was so extraordinary. It's a 60% reduction in the caseload standards. And the problem with that enormous number is crime is not going to reduce itself by 60% to accommodate the caseloads. And if you don't have the lawyers and you don't have the money and suddenly you're doing 60% less work, well, the squeeze looks like this. Prosecutors across the state who also are overworked are only going to be charging the high priority crimes like homicides, sexual assaults. And so the middle band crimes, those sort of, crimes that are much more common that people experience. My car is stolen, my house is burglarized, my business is vandalized, or things are taken. Those crimes are going to have to take second place. I mean, they already do in some respects, but now with a 60% reduction, it will be even more. So my perspective on that is if the Supreme Court is in a quasi legislative capacity, then there are things we can do to improve that. We can open it up more. It can be more transparency. You can bring more people to the table to make those decisions. And so I would bring a different viewpoint on that. And I guess my one last piece on this is I've been working in Olympia quite a bit. And one of the things I've seen over the years is the voice, there's been a lot of reform and it's positive reform for the judiciary. But one of the voices that is consistently lost or I'm seeing be lost in reform discussions are the voices of crime victims. And they sometimes become second thoughts. And
I
that,
represent a lot of crime victims, by the way, in my civil practice. So,
yeah, yeah. So that to me, again, I would call it an area of growth. Like there's a reset available in that, and I think I could bring some focus there.
real quickly, Sean, there's a lot of money being spent on judicial races around the country, including Washington State, by individuals, independent expenditure groups. For example, the plaintiffs' tort bar and the insurance industry and corporate interests are frequently clashing on lots of torts issues, civil justice issues. I guess my question for you is what is your take on the role of big money in these judicial appellate races in Washington State and around the country?
Well, you are correct that there's big money involved, and there are different ways that can be involved. There are independent expenditures, and the vernacular is IEs, independent expenditures, and then there are direct contributions. And you're right that there are lawyers who get really invested in putting money towards a seat, and those lawyers can be all of the same, wear the same hat in their practice. So it's a real thing.
Do you think it's the best system?
Which part? The money part,
The
or
way we select judges in Washington State, the role of money in judicial elections in Washington State right now?
well, so the best system. I mean, I don't know if I would have been a judge if I didn't run for judge the first time, and uh, I'm really glad I ran because it meant I had to go out and talk to people and hear about their experiences in court and what worked and what didn't work, and it made me a better judge. And in this round, I mean, I would have loved to have been appointed to one of the open seats, but I wasn't. And so my path to getting elected or to getting to the Supreme Court is through election. So in that instance, for both the candidate and for the public, choice matters. Like choice is important. And the voters get, it's their court. And so they get agency in who will be on their court. So I support that part of it. The money part of it, we have requirements like in Washington State where you got to disclose who's giving and what you've received, and those are pretty vigorous. But the money part of it is like this is the problem with judicial, like this isn't a problem with judicial races. They fly below the radar. So a lot of people are like, well, how much does it cost to actually run a campaign for judge? To be competitive, you're probably 750 to $1 million for a statewide race to get your message out above all the political noise or the oxygen sort of being sucked up by other issues. But here's the thing: I can never ask anyone for money. Like judges are prohibited from doing that. I put a firewall in my campaign too, and I don't want to know who's other than my mom and dad. I don't want to know who's giving, and because that's just a weird system. You got to rely on people to ask for you. And so for a candidate who doesn't have a great network but could be an excellent judge, you're at a disadvantage. Or a candidate who wouldn't be very good or didn't have the experience, if you're backed by a certain group and they flood your campaign with money, well, that's also not a good outcome. And I think both have happened.
lot there. We could do a whole show on the role of money in campaigns, judicial campaigns too, but we're not. I'm going to move to some other topics. So you were born in what, 1972?
71, my friend.
71. Okay, I was born 70. So when you were born, Nixon was president.
I
If you
remember that. Oh, no, sorry.
if you could talk sports with sports only conversation with the president of your lifetime, Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, Bush 41, Clinton, Obama, Biden, or Trump, who would it be if you could talk sports with any president in your lifetime?
Oh, probably Obama. President Obama knew basketball. He loves basketball, and I think his brother-in-law was a college coach.
That's right. That's right.
Um, he has pretty good. Yeah, he's got a pretty good handle. Yeah, I'd talk to him about basketball.
I asked the famous former NBC Meet the Press host Chuck Todd that question last year. He said 1A, W. Bush in baseball, 1B, Obama in basketball. That was his
Oh,
response.
really?
Yeah.
He went with Bush Jr.
Bush Jr. Yeah. Although
Yeah.
Bush Sr. played baseball at Yale. We talked about that,
Bush Sr. played baseball at Yale. Yeah.
Right.
Did Bush Jr. play baseball
Nobody
anywhere?
owned the Rangers.
Oh, well, that okay. He
Well,
owned
it
the
does.
Rangers. So, okay.
But a lot of people picked Obama. Who is a living sports figure you'd love to spend time with and interview, and who's a deceased sports figure in history you would love to spend time interviewing?
Um, let's see. Living. Oh, I would love to spend time with Ichiro. Like if you could sign me up for a dinner or an afternoon with that guy, like I just think he is amazing.
Yeah,
Like everything he touches is gold.
he can hit singles.
I,
He could hit singles too.
I just, I mean, everything about his play just dazzled. Seriously, like so fun to watch. So okay, Ichiro living. Um,
Deceased. Who's a deceased sports figure you'd love to spend time with? Could be an owner, manager, player, whatever.
mm, okay, let me. Well, you know, the champ,
Who?
Muhammad Ali.
Muhammad Ali. Yeah, he comes up a
Yeah,
lot.
the
Yeah,
champ. Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like, and I wouldn't want to, I might want to talk to him a little bit about boxing. I would want to talk to him about his poetry. Like
Yeah.
that guy, you know, before he was suffering from the cognition issues, and not even really well, it wasn't really cognition, it was just his body slowing down. But like that guy, his mind was so sharp and fast and funny and insightful. Like I love watching those old sort of documentaries where he's sparring with Howard Cosell and
Roll the Manila, Leon Fraser. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
oh God, that's just the greatest. So yeah, those are my two. Ichiro,
Good
so if you
names.
know Ichiro and you can set that up for me, maybe on the 200th edition.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if each one ever come up. I'd love to get them. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Okay. You are a judge. You've been an attorney for many years. Who is a living figure in the law you'd love to interview and spend time with? Who's a deceased figure in the law you would have loved to spend time
Okay, I'm going to flip those. Deceased Earl Warren.
with? Hmm.
And people sometimes ask me, like I fill out a lot of questionnaires. People ask me, like, who do you admire most? Like he's at the top. Earl Warren. Uh, what I really liked about him is that guy knew how to build consensus, and his court changed the country. Like it was the 100-year pivot, 125-year pivot point for America, the decisions that came out of there. And we still have that framework, Brown versus Topeka Board of Education, Gideon v. Wainwright, Miranda, and he delivered 9-0s in two of the three of those decisions. And, in the 50s and 60s, no easy thing, but he was a consensus builder. And I just look sort of, sadly at the state of the country today. Consensus. I just don't know if that's a possibility on so many different things when we need consensus. So Earl Warren, absolutely a figure I'd want to sit down and talk to. Okay, now you asked a living.
Living person in
Uh,
law you find interesting to spend time with, talk to.
mm, that's a bit harder. Let me think here. Living. Um,
You know, I had Bob Whitsitt on, the former Sox GM. He answered John Grisham.
oh, that's
Yeah,
not a bad
yeah,
one.
yeah, the
Grisham.
novelist.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it doesn't have to. It can be just be anyone. You know, someone with a law background. You know, so it can be. It's a very broad question.
Yes. Oh, someone with a law background. Well,
Yeah, practicing attorney,
I,
but
I'm not going to say Kim Kardashian.
okay.
Um,
But
it might be one of the justices. Kagan was president. I think she was president at Harvard. I might be Kagan.
might be Kagan. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I like she's more quiet up there, but boy, I think there's a lot of firepower. So yeah, I think it would be
Kagan. And of the
yeah,
nine members in the Supreme Court, who would be the second one you'd most want to spend time with? There's you already mentioned Kagan, Sotomayor, Ketanji Brown Jackson, Chief Justice Roberts, Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, Comey Barrett, Alito, and Thomas. Who are the other eight? If you could pick one more you want to spend time with, you already mentioned Kagan as the legal figure, but
Kagan would be the lead off. Yeah, because I appreciate her career. It might be a tie for second place.
oh
So tie for second place because they're different, but they're both interesting. Um, I think it would be Sotomayor and then Gorsuch.
yeah, yeah.
I think those would be my tied for second. Like
You
Gorsuch
want
is
to hear
doing
an
some
interesting Gorsuch Seattle connection? His late uncle was the Reverend at the Epiphany Church in the Madrona neighborhood in Seattle one time.
really.
Yeah, people don't realize that.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So
Well, he's had such interesting decisions about Congress sort of abdicating its responsibility as a branch of government. Like I'd want to talk to him about that and his
you
thinking
find it
there.
interesting. Yeah, yeah.
I find that interesting. And then Sotomayor, she said she's also had a amazing career and just her human insight is exceptional. And anyways, those
Yeah,
would be my second
yeah.
choices.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm going to mention five famous American sports law cases. I went online today and I wanted to find what
Oh
actually amounts
boy,
to
like
famous
really?
sports law cases. Yeah. Well, I'm here. I'm going to here, Mike. I'm going to mention them to you. Then I'm going to ask you a question or two.
Okay.
So the five most well-known American sports law cases are one, O'Bannon versus NCAA 2015. That set up the whole NIL path.
And
Number
yeah.
two is listed NCAA versus Alston 21. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the NCAA um, had limitations in restricting education-related benefits for athletes. That's had some effects. Third one that came up is the PGA Tour versus Casey Martin, 2001. The Supreme Court ruled the ADA required the PGA to allow a golfer with a disability to use a cart. Four, the 1971 famous Flood versus Kuhn case, a landmark U.S. Supreme Court case that upheld the antitrust exemption for Major League Baseball. There was some subsequent stuff with that case, but that came with collective bargaining, but that's another story. And the fifth one that's mentioned, there's obviously more, is the Lance Armstrong doping scandal. It was an arbitration, well, technically an arbitration. It's one of the most famous legal fights in sports where a massive athlete was stripped of his titles, Lance Armstrong. So, which of these cases of these five do you find the most interesting and why?
Wow.
What
Okay.
is that question? Grade the
First,
question.
first a confession. Like,
Yeah.
other than your very brief description and a
Okay.
hazy memory, I don't know much about them. I think the baseball antitrust case would interest me the most. Um, because those discussions sort of kick around in the other sports, and you see the politics involved and the flex with, oh, we're going to pull their antitrust exemption, and then I'm pretty sure, like just to go way back, I'm pretty sure there was a flex with the Mariners where they were the pilots back then. Oh wait, let me get no, that would be afterwards.
Spencer
Like,
Haywood fought the NBA on an antitrust case. Yeah.
oh, is that what it was?
Yeah. Yeah. Spencer Haywood. I'd love to get my podcast at some point, but
Okay. Well, that's my
um,
choice.
yeah, yeah. Fascinating case. There's a great book about that Kurt Flood called A Well-Paid Slave. I highly recommend it. It's a great book
Mm.
about baseball and the law. I know you're a busy guy right now, but I think you'd enjoy it. It's a very well-written book about Kurt Flood and his life. And he strongly was against the reserve clause in baseball. He felt it was not right that he had to be forced to play for a certain team. But yeah, I had Dershowitz on my show. We talked. He was involved in that case. He was one of Kurt Flood's attorneys. It was a
Oh,
very interesting
really?
conversation. Yeah, very interesting conversation.
Huh.
Olivia, jump in here. I know you have a couple more sports questions for Sean O'Donnell, and then we'll probably wrap it up. You've been so generous of your time.
Are you an NBA fan at all? I know it's tough in Seattle.
Well, currently, no. I mean, no Sonics, no fan. Like, why
Yeah.
bother?
Are there any teams that you're at least a little bit excited to watch in the playoffs that are happening, I think,
For,
literally right now?
for NBA playoffs?
Yes.
None.
Fair enough. Okay. Um, Favorite Seattle sports memory?
Oh, uh, well, I've got a couple. I mean, Edgar driving Griffey in to beat the Yankees in the Kingdom, like that's will forever be in my brain. My other favorite sports memory is beating the Packers with 1 minute and 38 seconds left to go to the national or to the playoffs. I can't remember what year that was. Was it 2012? Don't you remember? Like that was the greatest collapse of all time of any football team, and the Packers will never forget it. And I love that game. I remember when the Sonics won the NBA championship. It was sort of a weird thing. Lenny Wilkins' family lived just down the street from us, and his daughter actually babysat me a couple times
Wow.
when I was a kid. And I remember my dad went to an auction. We still have in the family the signed one of the. I'm sure there are many signed championship basketballs, but we got one of those kicking around somewhere. So that's a memory. And then I was at I got really lucky this past fall. I was at Game Five against the Blue Jays. Great game, great game. Um, so yeah, those are some of my. Well, then my own personal sports memory. 1989, playing in the Tacoma Dome for the AAA boys basketball championship. We lost in overtime to Chief South. Um, Still stings. Double overtime, actually. But I'll never forget that. That was a heck of a game.
That's cool.
Oh, sorry, that was long-winded.
No, those are
No.
good ones. I like
Shocking.
that. Wrote them all
Shocking
down.
that a judge would be long-winded.
Hey, I was out with some friends, including your our mutual friend John Stridle. I think it was last year, and John reintroduced himself to Doug Christie, who's now the Sacramento Kings coach. And John mentioned that he played against Doug Christie in high school. Did you play against Doug Christie?
Well, I was on the JV squad when we played against Christie,
Okay,
but
okay.
Doug Christie had the single nastiest dunk on one of my teammates than I have ever seen, and I'm not naming names, but I will never forget that either. Doug Christie was extraordinary. Like, I mean, what a career he's had, but as a high school basketball player, he just was like a legend among boys.
A great
Uh,
Washington high school basketball player, played in the NBA for 15 years, who's now the Sacramento
Yeah,
Kings
now
coach. Yeah,
now
yeah.
he's isn't he the GM
And
at
he's a coach of Sacramento Kings, I believe. Yeah,
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 the
yeah,
Kings, right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. When I said hello to him at the Last Shot Blue Water, I said, Doug, what are you up to these days? He goes, oh, I coach Sacramento Kings.
I mean,
Yeah, 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 yeah,
coach the Sacramento Kings,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know,
Well,
keep
what
it
a
real.
fun hour and change. You've been so generous of your time and a little sports law and politics. And good
Yeah.
luck on the campaign trail. And
Thank
I'll
you.
see you
Appreciate
around.
that.